Right, welcome back to Back with a Bang. Obviously myself, Charlie Walden, co-host Joe Mcglade, and today I've got a special guest, aspiring NBA journalist Adam Taylor. Adam, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
No problem. So I was talking to you before about this, before we started the podcast. I've seen all the work you've done and it's brilliant. First of all, I just want to know, where did you all start and how did you get into it?
Man, well, I've been a basketball fan for like ever. I played basketball growing up, played for Birmingham, the West Midlands, dabbled with national level stuff growing up. Then obviously you get older, so your job takes priority and stuff. So I started just like someone told me like get on Twitter, start like just get involved. And then it just went from there really. Like I ended up doing like an independent blog for a while, an independent podcast. Didn't really get many listeners. No one really gave a shit, to be quite honest. Then over the course of like a year, people started reaching out like, hey, would you want to write for us? Or do you want to come and do a podcast with us? And you can interview X, Y, and Z. And it kind of just started to snowball. So then I ended up with SB Nation, who are absolutely enormous, especially the Celtics site. It's, I think it's number 2 in the world, directly below Celtics.com. So it's pretty much the biggest independent Celtics site out there. So that was great working with them. And then obviously the exposure they give you if you put the work in. Unibet came along and said, hey, do you want to do the NBA betting for us? Of course. And then you just kind of, it all snowballed. So it was very incremental, slow. Like you have like, what I've noticed is everything peaks quite quickly. And then you have like a period of stagnation. And just when you think you're not getting any further, it peaks again. And that's kind of how it's been over the last like 2-3 years.
Where did the idea come from? Was it a friend like you said that obviously said, get on Twitter, start doing some blogs and some tweets about the Celtics?
Yeah, so it's just like, because obviously you know what it's like, man. You can't, like, you go into work and everyone wants to talk about the footy. The footy's not on, they'll talk about the rugby. I don't care about what's going on in either of those sports. So I'm coming in every morning like, no, everyone's talking about footy, and I'm like, I want to know who watched the LA game, or I want to know who watched the Spurs win the title game. And everyone's like, dude, you're in the wrong place. We hear Twitter's the place for that stuff, so you might as well go there. So that's what I did. And obviously it takes a long time to build up a following. So for a while, you're kind of just talking to yourself, except online. And eventually people start responding. And then it's all about building up that respect base from there.
How important do you think that is, really, those opening sort of stages when you really do start out independent with your own blog? How important do you think that is to start learning the trade and learning new experiences?
Yeah, I mean, it's super important. It all comes down to your mindset, though. So, like, you can either just be doing it because you want somewhere to put your thoughts and you don't care about how many people read it. It's not really anything more than just somewhere to write about, like a diary, right? Like a sports diary. But if you're trying to do this as like a job, or it's something that you want to pursue, then it's super important to get into the habit of writing every day, the consistency. Go back and reread your work once you've wrote it, so you can be like, right, this reads good, this bit doesn't flow very well, and start to like break down and critique your own work. That's when you start to see actual growth, because if your writing is getting better after every article, the people that come and stick with you from the very beginning, and I've got probably 600-700 followers that have been with me since like the very initial blog, and they've seen me improve the way I write, the way I use the, like alliteration and synonyms, and you start to build out from there. And that's a really good way of building that base respect as well, because those 700, however low that number may sound, if you put 700 people in a room, that's a lot of people, that they grow with you, and they're always going to be your biggest fans that will help share that content. But you have to show them that you're willing to improve to even earn that initial respect.
Yeah, you talk about improvement though. Did you not study like some sort of journalism? Because I always found as well, before I went to college, I was doing some similar sort of things too. Like I was doing like my own sort of voluntary work and was working on a blog. You said obviously not really learning from before anything, just learning from experiences sort of thing, learning as I go. Is that your sort of a journey that you've learned as you're going in this business?
Yeah, I mean, like, I never really, like, I went to college and so I screwed about a lot. I was always into something or some other thing, being a bit of a nutcase on the, like, just chilling with the lads, going to the pub every night and stuff, being a lad. So like, didn't really care about college too much at the time. When I was 27, I went back to uni and started doing like a part-time degree in computer science. So I had no journalism background whatsoever. As this started to get legs and move forwards, and I was like more and more focused on the journalism side of things, I was about I was about halfway through my computer science degree. And I phoned the uni. I said, look, this is what I'm doing. At the time, I just had an article like kind of got featured on like USA Today, the Washington Post had put it up on there, like a few big sites had like ran with it. So I said to the uni, like, look, here's a link to this. Like, I'm having work featured on these big sites. I want to change my degree. But I don't want to start from 6 years out again because I'll be nearly 40 by the time, you know what I mean? And they were really cool. They worked with me and they helped me switch my degree and carry over my credits. So now I'm studying creative writing and journalism. But that wasn't until I started that in September. So I'd already got to where I am now pretty much with no journalistic background.
Since you've joined that course then and you've switched over, have you noticed any difference in your sort of writing? Have you noticed that already? Obviously,
the more I write now, the more I'm like, yo, this is trash. Like, I'm a lot more critical because there's a lot more I know what to look out for in terms of like flow. Flow is very important. Something I never really thought about much before was like how it reads back. Like I was just like, yo, people are reading it, so I don't really care how it looks. Now I'm very much more like, I'll write it and I'll leave it for an hour, and then I'll come back and reread it, and it makes the self-editing process a bunch easier. So it's definitely helping, but not in the ways that I was expecting it to.
Yeah, what's the sort of best piece of advice? Because I've had quite a bit of advice over the years. Sometimes bad, sometimes good, like you in the run business sort of thing. You've had some advice that stood out to you at the start when you started doing this from certain someone?
I mean, it's a cliche, but the best piece of advice I got was at the very beginning, and it was just write every day, even if you're not publishing it, even if it's not going out into the ether. Right, just because it's like a muscle, right? You have to keep doing it every single day to develop your style, to develop your tone. And sometimes like I've got like notebooks over there where I'm writing in all the time. I've got like I'll write things out on like Word, or I'll just open up a Grammarly page and just go, and then I'll just Control Alt Delete everything at the end of the day and it's gone. But I've still worked those muscles for that day, and that's probably the best piece of advice I had, because it gets you into that mentality of, if I don't write today, I feel like something's off. Do you know what I mean? Like it's a habit for me now, and that means that I'm always going to keep up with deadlines.
Yeah, well,
we got told that lockdown. We got told that we had to write every day. Do you know what I mean? Just to make sure that we do remember the writing, the styles and different all that sorts. We got told to do that, and I didn't really do that. So back in September, I kind of struggled off of the bat.
Yeah, even like notebooks and stuff, you know, like just have a nice little notebook with you and just write anything. It doesn't have to be about sport. It doesn't, as long as your hands moving and words are coming down. I do a lot of it computerized, because then I can literally just delete it. If you're writing for creative writing, like books and stuff, then you want that repository. But if you're just writing to flex those muscles every single day, no matter what comes, just 20 minutes is more than enough. But it just means that, you know, like, do you guys go to the gym or anything like that?
I do.
So if you miss a day at the gym when it's meant to be your gym day, your whole day is off, right? It's that same scenario. Sorry, someone was at the door. I think it's that same scenario. Whereas if you don't do it, then that day doesn't feel right. But if you don't go for 2 or 3 days, now that habit's been broken, and rebuilding that habit is actually twice as hard as initially implementing it.
For sure. With the journalism and stuff, have you found when you got in a reel, you think, I've got this now? I know me, one point I got a bit cocky and I was like, I've got this now, I don't need to learn anything else. Then you get a big learning moment. Is that any of them stood out to you over the years?
I try and be like, I'm like my own worst critic, so I'm never like, I've got this, like I've sorted this out. Like I have moments like, I'll get a big interview sorted out and I'll do that, and I'm like, yeah, this is awesome, I'm awesome. And then like a day later, I'm like, man, what's next? That was a day ago. Like I'm always looking for that next step. So when I write stuff, I'm usually like, right, this one section was great, I got this on lock. But then the next section, I'm like, oh no, I completely went away from what I was trying to do. So I try to be really over analytical of myself, because the only way you're going to continue to improve is by being brutally honest with the quality that you're producing. I've got a piece coming out today and I'm completely unhappy with the way it turned out. But usually when you're really unhappy with it is when everybody thinks it was good. So we'll see what happens.
Brilliant. With your sort of writing and stuff, and obviously the interviews you do, when you go into an interview, I know this happens to me personally. I'm always terrified, petrified when I actually get in the interview. I think you're a little bit the same, Joey, a little bit nervous, but I'm more or less petrified. But when I get into the interview, it's like, that's all good. I'm like chill now and everything's happy. What's your sort of feelings like when you're going into an interview?
I mean, it depends who the interview's with, right? Like, I've done a few big ones now. The one I've done most recently, I was quite nervous, but that was because there was things going on behind the scenes that if I do well, then maybe this opens up more opportunities. So sometimes I'm never nervous about the actual interview, but I'm always kind of nervous about how it's received, what it could mean moving forwards. Like, you interview a player, that opens the doors to other players because they see that you're not, you've done this before. They'll see whether you burn the guy. So did you get any information that you leaked out that you shouldn't have? Like, how do you conduct yourself? So once you start getting that body of work in, then the doors start to open elsewhere. I'm more nervous about that than I am about the actual interview.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm pretty much terrified, but it's always a thing where, like, as soon as I do it, it's like, yeah, it's all good now. But before, it could be my best mate I'm interviewing, but it's just always some reason just terrified of it. Just one of them things where
I feel same, yeah.
When I learn to do it.
Before the interview, I'm always nervous.
It gets much easier as you go on. Sometimes I've had interviews as well where the person I'm interviewing has been quite abrasive, and those are difficult. Very, very rare. I think I've done 2 of those out of probably about 700 or something stupid. So it's ridiculously rare. But you need those learning curves as well, where somebody's pushing back on the questions you're asking, because once you're face to face with people, if they don't like what you ask, they're going to push back. So it's all about learning and putting the stuff in the bank and being able to say, I've done this before. I've handled a situation like this before. So when it happens again, you can navigate it a bit easier.
Yeah, for sure.
I know the 2 interviews that I did, I've done 3 college basketball players, and 2 of them were like really good. They gave in good detailed answers. And one of them were a bit off, like he didn't give in as much detail. So like that one wasn't as fun, while the other 2, you know what I mean, were fun to them. Because when you get people like that, it makes the interview easier. Yeah,
sometimes it's about with guys that don't want to give as much answers, you have to think about what it means for them if they say something that they shouldn't say, or in a tone that they shouldn't say. Like college, especially college, but is this American college and Division 1? So these guys have got draft scouts looking at them. Whether or not this podcast you're doing is big or little, a scout will find it and they will use it as part of their personality reasoning. So sometimes it's better to be very minimalistic in the way you respond, because if you elaborate too much and you drop a hint of something you shouldn't have hinted about, that can affect your draft stock, which directly affects your money. And the other thing is knowing how to ask questions. Like if someone gives me a short answer, I've kind of learned how to press them to elaborate without pressing them. And that's just something you kind of have to learn for yourself, because what works for one guy isn't going to work for the other. But it's definitely that's part of the skills of getting those reps in and learning it that way.
Yeah, sure. What's one of your favorite interviews you've done?
I think Mike Gorman, the legendary Celtics commentator, was probably my favorite, just because every basketball game I remember watching for pretty much my entire life, he's been the voice that's come through the TV at me. And then getting to sit down camera to camera and getting to know him off air, then recording the podcast itself. Now we email sometimes, we check in, how you doing, he's keeping safe. That was awesome, because this guy's such a, you don't realize how much the commentators actually become part of the experience. And then getting to actually not build a friendship, but build an understanding between us and have that conversation. That was awesome. Yeah,
and that's a great feeling. When I was starting with my Chesterfield FC stuff, the things I do, the similar sort of thing happened with me and the Chesterfield players. It is really great, isn't it, when you idolise these players and these sort of personnel of the club and that, and then you go on to have a really good relationship with them. Then you get them on your podcast. It's great. It's a great feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, it was awesome. And obviously knowing that I can reach out again and do it again, and being able to just hear stories about back in the day and hear stories about other Celtics legends and stuff. It was awesome. Honestly, that wasn't the biggest interview I've done, but it was definitely my favorite one.
Great. Just for that problems and stuff, I think many people obviously encountered problems along the way of different career paths and stuff. What sort of problems have you encountered along the way?
I mean, I live here. That's probably the biggest problem. Definitely the biggest setback. Like I've been like super close to landing jobs stateside, and then it's all fell down when, you know, they realize like, oh, it's going to cost us X, Y, and Z amount of money to move him and his family with work visas and really that one. Like you can only go so far here, and then, you know, unless a big company like The Athletic or ESPN come for you, that, you know, the money it costs to move you over there is a drop in the ocean. That's definitely the number one biggest challenge. That's just absolutely. This day I have these conversations almost daily about how do I work around this, how do I figure this out, and then in COVID as well, where you can't get on a plane and be at games and network with people or be around the teams and, you know, and actually start to get your face out there because you just can't travel right now. That makes things a lot more difficult too. But definitely the distance.
How do you overcome that?
I'll let you know when it happens, man. At the moment, I just network a bunch. Like I'm constantly, like I've got a really good group of people that I'm in contact with a lot. I speak with a couple of guys that are like NBA insiders. So like I hit them up for advice a lot. Obviously, I use social media to make friends with agents. I started to make friends with like PR representatives for teams, and you just start working your ways in as much as you can. So then when you are on that side of the world, I've already got this book of contacts that I can start hitting up like, hey, where can you help me get into the media room today here? Or I'm here for media. Can we meet up afterwards and you can introduce me to...
Your microphone's off, Adam.
Sorry. And it's just about building those relationships from start to finish. And it's difficult, especially with the time difference. Like I'm messaging somebody at the moment about something I'm trying to get over the line. And he's messaging me as I'm going to sleep. I'm messaging him as he's going to sleep. So it just, things drag out that little bit more than what they would if we were face to face. But other than that, I'm still trying to figure it out myself. I haven't really mastered that yet.
Yeah, I get that as well when I'm trying to organise like interviews with American people. I've got this Australian presenter I'm interviewing next week and stuff, and that's been like sort of going back and forth over a few days because it's completely different time zones and stuff. Just on agents and PR representatives, a lot of people asked me when I got into all this, and we got into it with the players and managers and people like Gary Neville. How did you manage to do that? It is really all about the PRs and the agencies and getting close to them. How important is it for like getting close with them sort of people in this business?
I mean, it's super important, right? Like if you want to have, if you want to be the guy that can break the news or the guy that can, which isn't what I'm trying to do, because I think there's very specific types of journalism, right? You can be the insider, the guy that your job is to break news before somebody else breaks it. And if you get scooped, then it's, you know, you have to explain. That's too much pressure for me. But I feel like if that's the type of journalism you're going for, agents and PR teams need to be your best friend. Well, agents more than PR, because the agents will be the ones that feed you through the back channels, the information. For me, I utilize it for simple things. Like if I want to reach out to it, like a player was getting traded the other day and I know his agent. He was meant to be getting signed off free agency and I'm friends with, I know his agent. So I've hit his agent up like, if this gets over the line with player X signing, can I get an interview? Like, can I get the exclusive? And he's like, if it gets through, then I'll put that in place for you and you can get the exclusive. And that's important because PR teams will always navigate towards the big corporations, right? So if I'm asking for the exclusive and then the Athletic come and ask, it's always going to go to the Athletic, which is why for me, agents and publicists are actually more important than actual PR connections. Publicists are very undervalued in terms of what they can do for you for landing interviews and stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure, 100%. With interviews and stuff, sometimes you will just get a no. We're not doing it. Like, we're not going to speak to you. How have you managed to deal with that? If or when that's ever happened to you?
Yeah, it happens all the time. All the time. I'll say, okay, thank you for getting back to me. Be super polite, super understanding, and then 3 months later, I'll try again. And I'm just like I'm constantly polite. I speak to them like they're my grandma. You know what I mean? thank you very much. Yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Obviously, there are Americans I'm dealing with, so ma'am's important. But then I'll just circle back and be like, I'm wondering if anything has changed at the moment. And I'm persistent, but not pushy. Sometimes being a bit more pushy works, but I find that that's not my personality in terms of, hey, do this now, right now. So I don't try and approach it like that, because then I'm kind of being disingenuous to the experience that I have on the interview and for a long-term relationship. So I try and just be as authentic as possible. And if that means it takes a year to land a guest, and it takes a year to land the interview.
Yeah, for sure. It is really important, isn't it, persistence, like you say, but I think it's also important as well not to get over pushing, not to sort of, I think of the word, obsess if you don't get it. It's really important, isn't it, to not obsess, but be persistent.
Yeah, and the world of like podcasting and stuff has kind of made people so over reliant on landing interviews. Like every podcast now, it's all about who have you interviewed, who's your biggest guest, who's it. Like, if people are only tuning in or only reading your stuff, depending on whether you're a visual journalist, a verbal or a written, or you like to do all three, kind of like what I do. If they're only reading the stuff you do with the guest, that's not really an authentic audience, because they're going to leave once that guest is gone. I try and do like one guest a month, and then my audience that I actually see 4 or 5 times a week are there because of the content I'm producing, and the guest is a bonus. And then what I try and do then is I use that guest and try and retain a percentage of the people that come for that interview. And that's how you build that long-term audience, by just going for like 5% increases off each guest, but producing enough content on your own that they've got a reason to come back and listen to you and actually get to know what you're about and your outlook on things.
Yeah, it's important, isn't it, when you have sort of a big interview, or just even any interview, you keep following up the next day and you keep posting content, that you don't go dry on social media for a few days. Because really, I know myself personally, I follow accounts that are active and really post a lot of content. Like there's this guy, Mike Owens Media, who he's an MMA journalist and just posts MMA interviews every single day, and he's getting new ones, and I've seen him grow over time, and now he's interviewing UFC caliber fighters. So it's really important, isn't it, that you keep posting content and keep your pages active.
Yeah, and like I say, I try to limit the amount of stuff I do via interviews, because I want to actually grow for what I'm doing, not for leeching off multiple people. And so, like, it depends on the type of journalist you are. Are you an investigative journalist? If you are, then these interviews are exactly what you need to get done. If you're more of like an analyst, which is what I'm trying to shoot for, then I don't need to rely on those as much. Honestly, there's so many avenues that you can travel down, and each one comes with its own kind of game plan.
Yeah, for sure. We spoke a little bit off camera about it. Dream job sort of thing. I know it's obviously the States, but if you could pick a sort of certain role, maybe not a certain place, but just a few names in mind that you'd like to work for in the future, what would they be?
The Athletic, The Ringer, or ESPN. Those would be the three that would be the dream. Have I missed any? No, I think those three are the best. And then it'd be like a beat writer to begin with, travel with one team, focus on them. But the long term is like a national NBA writer. So you cover the whole league for one of the premium outlets out there. And that's tough, man. I mean, people don't realize, like, I never realized when I came into this, like, just hundreds, thousands of people trying to do exactly what you're trying to do. So how do you differentiate? How do you get above them? That's the hardest part. I feel like I'm doing a good job of getting above the non-professionals now. But you've always got people behind you that are trying to get above you. So what you need to not only keep improving to close the gap on the people in front, but you also need to keep improving to widen the gap for the people behind. And that's more important to me right now than landing a job that I might not be able to sustain because there's so many people clamoring for it every 10 seconds. Yeah,
for sure. How do you think you differentiate yourself from those professionals in that way? Because they are the label professionals. How do you differentiate yourself from them and stand out?
I'm still trying to figure that out. I mean, the Celtics media, the majority of them I'm on really good terms with. Most of them, I've got open lines of communication with pretty much all of them. I know what they're doing. I'm trying to like, you've got your guys that are very big on film analysis. You've got your guys that are very big on the human aspect of the game. Who was tired? Why were they tired? You've got your guys that are really big on the money aspect. So everyone who was like in the media at the moment all have these defined niches. And I'm kind of somewhere in the middle where I kind of know a bit about everything and I'm still trying to figure out which avenue to go. But at the moment, I know enough about each bit that I've kept the gap between the people coming up wide enough. But I also haven't started to close the gap on anyone in front of me yet because I'm still like, well, which one suits me best? And that's the hardest part because then that takes a lot of like self, like not internal, like, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? You know what I mean?
Progression.
Yeah, self-knowledge more than anything. Like you've got to understand what you want because the minute you make that choice and you start going down that one avenue, that's you. That's what you're going to be. And I've seen people make that choice too soon and not be able to re-steer the ship. And then they've had to just give up. And they've put in all these years getting to where they were. So I'm playing it very, very, very precise at the moment and just trying to figure out what fits with me. And while I'm doing that, it's all about building audience.
Yeah, for sure. Finally, before I let Joe get into the juicy stuff, the NBA, with you obviously being in the UK, what advice would you give to people like Joe looking to get into this sort of area and other people as well, trying to get into NBA and report on basketball and stuff like that?
Just learn as much as you can about the game. And other guys like me specifically, with the UK guys, I'm terrible for this. I'll pull you up. If I see you put something out that's factually incorrect, I'll pull you up. Because my outlook on it is it's already hard enough to get that respect from an American market being English anyway. The more people doing it is fantastic if they're putting the research in to actually understand what they're speaking about. The more people doing it that just don't have a clue, that's going to negatively impact not just you, but everybody else. But I think the best thing to do is just learn as much about the game as you can, write every day, and network like crazy mainly with the American market. It's all well and good networking with the English market, but if your goal isn't to work in England, then you need to widen that net and start to get in touch with everybody stateside and start building your own contact book and then network with other English guys that are on that same wavelength and start to see what they can learn from you, what you can learn from them, and make it kind of like a bit of a support group.
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead, Joe, mate.
All right, well, so what I want to ask you is, obviously this season the Celtics have played decent. So what do you think about their season so far?
I wouldn't say decent. They've played okay. Yeah, I mean, look, from losing Gordon Hayward, picking up 2 vet guys in the summer in Thompson and Teague, but neither vet has really well, I didn't expect Teague to play well in the first place, but that was neither vet's really hit the ground running. Defense has looked very lackluster. It looked better against LA, but it's still not what you'd come to expect from a Celtics team. I think there's a lot of optimism around this team. There's a lot of good things going on. A lot of young guys that are going to keep developing and improving throughout the year. I don't think it's a championship season, personally. I'd be shocked if they won a championship this year. I do think it's a very good year for internal development, taking stock of what's already in the cupboard and making decisions what to do in the offseason, where I think this offseason is going to be quite big in shaping the long-term future of the team. At the moment, I'm happy because you lose an all-star guy like Hayward that's gone to Charlotte and elevated his level of play there. You can never expect to come back as the same team that you finished the season as. So I think they're doing really well. I think there's a lot to improve on, but it could have also been a lot worse. So I'd give it a solid 6 out of 10 at the moment.
Well, you see, I've seen that obviously Tatum and Brown are doing well. Well, Brown's made himself an all-star for this season for sure. But who do you think would be like that one piece the Celtics need to literally take themselves to the championship? Like what one position or one player they need to improve that team?
I don't know about player. They definitely need more help at the power forward.
Yeah,
I like the idea of looking at Thaddeus Young for that. I think he's having a great year. He's playing on a really poor team in Chicago. Could definitely be the guy that could come in and help a contending team get a little bit deeper into the playoff run. A lot of people say they need more size at the 5. I disagree. Teams are moving away from having that size at the 5. You want versatility at that point. If you can get a big man that can shoot threes and distribute, fantastic. If you can't, then start looking to have that versatility at that position too. So for me, yeah, it's definitely the 4 position. A guy like Thaddeus Young would be great. And then they need some of these younger guys to take that next step this year. Romeo Langford needs to come back from injury and be a better version of what he was last year. Peyton Pritchard needs to come back from injury and be what he was to start the year. Grant Williams needs to figure out what the hell's going on there. I think it's because he's playing the 4 now and his primary position is the small ball 5. But with the way the 3 bigs are rotating at the minute, there's no minutes to put a small ball 5 in there because you've already got Daniel Tice, Robert Williams, Tristan Thompson. There's not really enough minutes to go around and give Grant Williams time in his primary position. So he needs to figure that out and figure out how he can be effective at the 4. So yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces that could make this team better. But if I'm going to point at one player that's realistic, Thaddeus Young makes the most sense.
Yeah, it does. I totally agree. And like you said, Pritchard, he were a good, like a bright spark off the bench for him, weren't he? But since he's been injured, the bench looks a bit lost, to be fair.
Yeah, the bench is trash. If you watch against the Lakers, the only guy off the bench that scored until late in the 3rd was Robert Williams. And then Teague scored 2 buckets. And that was pretty much it. The bench just isn't providing the points that you need to contend. If you look at the Lakers and how deep they are from 1 through 10, the size that they have, the experience that they have, you can rely on anyone coming off the bench and giving you legitimate minutes. Then you look at the Celtics and it's very much, we're going to have to rotate 6 deep on the bench to find one guy that's having that on night that's going to be able to provide that scoring punch. So yeah, again, though, that's where the internal development needs to come into it more than making wholesale changes.
See, that's what I've seen with Brooklyn. I know obviously Brooklyn signed James Harden, but the assets they gave away, like all them, like Jared Allen and all that, the high, Brooklyn are struggling bad on the defense. I mean, they're getting dominated defensively, rebounding, and I don't think they'll win the championship. Obviously, they've got the firepower, but the bench, there's nothing there. There's no depth at all.
Yeah, but they made a move to kind of shore a little bit of that perimeter deal with Iman Shumpert the other day. He played really well for them last year. His defense is solid on the perimeter. If they want to add a little bit more size on the wing for defense, then I can see them taking a look at Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, who played there last year. He's a free agent now. They have the roster space to do so. It's just about whether or not there's interest from both parties. But again, I don't think they so much need a big. If they do need a big, there's going to be some guys available. But some added wing depth that is primary remit is to defend and just be a 3-and-D lockdown guy. RHJ makes a bunch of sense. And look, I'm high on Jarrett Allen. I think that was a really good work by Cleveland to play the fringes of that trade and come away with something like that. So, yeah, I mean, Brooklyn could win. Look, at the end of the day, this is early doors. They're still learning to play together. James Harden is a very underrated on-ball defender, especially in the post. KD can play 2-way. The only one there that's really lackluster defensively is Kyrie Irving. And you kind of knew that when you signed him. You don't sign him to defend. You sign him to light guys up, and that's what he will do.
What did you make about the whole Kyrie situation back in Boston? Because obviously he said he wanted to stay there, and then obviously he went the season after.
Yeah, I mean, look, man, at the start when he said that, made sense. Hayward was coming back off injury. They'd been to the conference finals without him. They realized they'd found somebody, a diamond in the rough in JT. I say in the rough, he was a 2nd pick or 3rd pick. But they'd found another scorer in JT. Jaylen Brown was still developing. It looked rosy. Al Horford was still there. And then everything that could go wrong went wrong. People weren't happy with roles. There was infighting. There was fractions kind of creating in the locker room. And then the opportunity to go to your hometown and play in front of your hometown crowd, be closer to your family, be closer to your dad, be closer to the community that you're constantly giving back to anyway. That opportunity arose. And then on top of that, to go and play with your best friend in the league in KD. I understand why he did it. It sucks. And I think that if he hadn't said that at the start of the year, the backlash would have been far less severe than what it was. But at the end of the day, he never signed as a free agent. He was traded to Boston. He didn't make that choice to be there. That choice got made for him. He didn't have a no trade clause. He could be traded anywhere. So to expect him to show loyalty to a franchise he never personally chose to play for, I always felt that was a bit too much to expect from a guy.
Here's one question: do you miss Isaiah Thomas for the Celtics?
Yeah, I do, but I think people think he's going to come if like he did come back. They think he'd be the same player that he was then. He's not going to be that guy. He's had 2 hip surgeries since then. He hasn't played in over a year, like professionally at an NBA level. And the last few stops he's had haven't been great production. So while I would say like bringing him back for nostalgia, and I genuinely think he can't be worse than Jeff Teague, just so we can get that out there. But bringing him back for nostalgia makes a lot of sense. But at what point does, and I wrote about this last year, at what point does bringing him back actually tarnish the legacy that he left when he left Boston? You see it with like football, right? Like Lampard's just got sacked from Chelsea. So how much did Lampard's bad management of Chelsea, perceived bad management, whatever was going on? I don't follow football. I just know he got sacked. Tarnish the legacy he leaves behind as a player. As much as you don't want those two things to bleed into each other because they're separate instances, they always will go hand in hand through that story of his time with a club. So that's why I'm personally against bringing IT back.
Who is your favorite Celtic player of all time?
I mean, I grew up just towards the end of Larry Bird's career. So I remember seeing Larry play a little bit. But Paul Pierce is the guy that I grew up watching be an assassin, be an absolute killer. And then KG was a menace. But it has to be Paul Pierce, right? Like, he's the player that really imprinted on me growing up. When I was playing, I tried to mimic my game a lot as Paul Pierce in terms of my off-ball movement and stuff. So, yeah, Paul Pierce would be my number 1 Celtic all time.
I totally agree. Paul Pierce is totally underrated. I've seen clips of him, and obviously, like I watched the 2008 Celtics team. Like, do you think that team underachieved a bit? Do you think they could have won more?
I mean, the chips just didn't fall right. The next year, they got some injuries in the playoffs, and then the year after, they were injured again. They were an old team. Like what someone said this to me the other day, and it really kind of struck with me. The Lakers now, that old team with a small, very slim championship window, are like what the 2008 Celtics were. And the Celtics are like what that young Miami team that had just landed LeBron were. So, it's the old guard passing the torch to the new. The Lakers are solid now, but what happens if LeBron goes down or if AD goes down? They don't have the depth to now be a championship team. Whereas if we've seen the Celtics can win games without one of their guys because they have the legs, the youth, to keep running and keep grinding, and they don't need to sit for as long. So, I think the 2008 team did underachieve in terms of championships, but again, it wasn't all because of them. A lot of it was to just do with aging bodies breaking down.
I seen you interviewed Kendrick Perkins, and I just want to know how that came about because obviously he's massive in America and he's on ESPN all the time. So how did that come about?
I can't really talk about how it came about just because there was some stuff in the back channels that was going on. He's huge. It's definitely something that I'm hoping will happen again. It's something that I'm hoping will happen along with other ESPN employees again, but it's not really something I can go into in terms of how that came about, unfortunately.
I seen you interview Gordon Hayward as well. Did you fanboy a bit out when you interviewed Boston's player?
No, I've interviewed a few players before Gordon. Crazy, that came about because I wrote an article defending him when all the fans were going against him. And his wife actually promoted it on her Instagram story. She shot me a follow from there. And I actually managed to get in touch with Gordon Hayward through going through his wife. So that was a really funny way because I just wrote an article and thought nothing of it. And then next thing I know, my phone's blowing up and people are Robin Hayward's done blowing you up on Instagram. Hayward's retweeted it on Twitter. The team are interacting with this article and stuff. And then I just shot her a follow, hey, any chance I could speak to Gordon off the back of this? And she was like, yeah, I'll put it in place for you. And that was probably the easiest interview I've ever landed with somebody in the league because it was just I went directly through his wife. So it was literally over dinner. She's like, oh, I've arranged an interview for you. So that was dope. That was awesome.
I'd say, who's your dream NBA player to ever interview him?
Michael Jordan. Completely and utterly, it would be Michael Jordan. If I was ever going to fanboy out over somebody, it would be if I interviewed Michael Jordan. I don't know if that would ever happen. I doubt it. I I am lucky enough that like when NBA Paris comes over and stuff, I can get media credentials, and Jordan's usually there. So it's always possible. Never say never, but I honestly, genuinely believe that I'd hit the lottery before I managed to interview Jordan.
Yeah, so Jordan, LeBron, and Steph are probably my favorites because massive Steph Curry fan. So it'd definitely be between them three. But who do you think this season, since the season, like you said, it's early starter, but who do you think is like looking to be the best title contender this season?
The Lakers are the best title contender this season. I don't even think that's up for debate. After them, the Clippers are definitely second. Then it's probably going to be the Bucks. I think Utah are playing really well at the moment. Whether or not they can keep it up, we'll wait to see. Same for Denver. But the two LA teams have definitely got the dominant rosters this year. They're going to be the two teams to beat. And obviously only one of them goes through to the finals. But when you look at who's out east, I don't think any Eastern Conference team has the depth to be able to deal with that LA team. I might be wrong. Anything can happen between now and then. But as things stand, the Lakers are just too deep.
So yeah, Adam, I'm a big fan of the UFC. I know the UFC continued throughout the pandemic. Took a couple of weeks break, but it continued, and there's been minimal really positive tests. They really set a precedent, I would say, with that. But then the NBA came along, and their bubble was superb. Just talk to me how important that was and how impressed you was by it.
Yeah, first of all, shout out to Keith Smith. He works alongside me at CelticsBlog. It was his idea to actually run the bubble through Disney World. He was the one that started that whole train off when he wrote a piece for Yahoo Sports. So big shout out to him. I think the NBA done great. They've really stayed very stringent. If you want to hear some crazy stories, go back and listen to an interview I did with a guy called Scott Pollard. You'll hear some stories that didn't make the media from that bubble. He's an ex-NBA guy and knows a few guys that were inside the bubble. They are good stories, to be fair. But if you want to look at the way they did it, they tested every day. There was very stringent rules on about who came onto the premises, who left the premises. Everything was accounted for, and they did not let anybody break that bubble. If you did, you were suspended, and you still had to be around teammates that you've let down. So, you've got that animosity that forms because it's like we could do with you on the floor. And they've done an entire, 12-week period or something stupid without a single positive COVID test. They kept it very, the people that worked there had to go through stringent testing every morning before they were allowed on camp. Then they had to be tested again on the way out, temperature test before every game, physicians on call all the time. It was superb. It was perfect. I don't think anywhere in the world they've managed to keep COVID at bay for that amount of time in a confined area. So I think they executed it excellently. And then you look at governments and they can't figure out how to do it. So,
I know what was interesting. I know what was interesting in the bubble was that we got like Matisse Feigl and JaVale McGee, vlogging the entire trip. They were doing fishing. They were doing all these activities and they had wristbands to say they were going in and out. Like, I always thought that were interesting. Like you said, the bubble was like just immaculate. Like how they run that was so impressive.
Yeah, and like these guys could go out in and out of their little areas and do that because the entire half of Disney World was shut down. It was just their little oyster because you can't just ask them to stay in their rooms all the time. So it makes perfect sense. And yeah, the vlogging stuff was fun. I liked watching some of that stuff.
It was. Last question. I've got one more question, and it's we've seen Brown's development. Do you think he could really become like the Celtics main star over Tatum, or do you think it'll always be Tatum?
Honestly, they're two different players. One's a transition guy and one's a half-court maestro. I don't really get into that who's better because they both play for the same team. So it makes no sense for me to care which one's better as long as they're both damn good. I think there's a world where Jaylen Brown can be a better guy. He's a better on-ball defender than Tatum is. He's better in transition than Tatum is. But Tatum's a better off-ball defender. Tatum's a better clutch moment scorer. Tatum's a better pull-up shooter. Tatum's better off the dribble. So they've both got aspects where they're better than each other. And they're two different types of wings. I'd prefer to look at what their ceiling is as a duo rather than as individuals. When one leaves the team, then I'll start looking at who's actually better from a skill set standpoint.
Yeah,
I've got
sure.
Sorry, Chad, I've just got one more. Do you think this NBA season has been a tad unfair? Because obviously, as the commentator said night before, Washington didn't play a game for 16 days. Like, That's got to be tough. And obviously Miami went on a losing streak because they didn't have Jimmy Butler, Avery Bradley. Like, do you think it's been a bit unfair this season?
Not at all. Every team's going to have a period where they play more than other teams. Every team's going to have a period where one of their players is out. It's at the end of the day, it's the NBA. Every player there is good enough to get you 20, 30 a night if they've got the opportunity to do so. It's the best 450 players in the world playing in that league. Is it unfair in terms of like some teams having to run without a superstar for a few months? That would happen in a normal season. Players go down injured every year. Is it unfair that some teams are playing more games in shorter periods? Yeah. But then they'll have a period where they don't play as much as other teams. There's only so many games you're playing this year. If you've played more early, you'll play less later, and it will even itself out. So I get why people are saying it's a little bit unfair, but to me, that narrative's flawed because every team's going to have rough patches throughout the season, as they would in a normal year.
Yeah, for sure. As an outsider of the NBA, I watch a lot of Stephen A. and entertaining sort of thing with his viewers and stuff. What are your thoughts on Stephen A.? I was just curious to know.
Man, I love Stephen A. I think he's hilarious. I like him. I think he's good for the game. Like, he's definitely I watch him, and I don't consider myself a casual fan. But he's definitely geared more towards the more relaxed NBA fandom than he is the diehards. Like, diehards will pull him up on some of the stuff he says because sometimes it's a bit outlandish. But for pure entertainment value, the guy's hilarious. I think he's great.
Yeah, it's a bit similar. Sorry, Joe. It's a bit similar of UFC. Sometimes comes in with the UFC and states his views, and of course, like the hardcores and that will pull him up on what he says and stuff. It's I do BJJ under Braulio. Oh, do you? Oh,
under Braulio, and you do it too, yeah.
You BJJ, yeah.
Yeah. So like when you're listening to guys like Stephen A. try and talk about how a submission got done, and it's just completely off the mark. It's hilarious. But again, he's not there for guys like you that understand what's going on. He's there for guys like anyone that's just watching it to watch two guys beat the shit out of each other. That's why he's there. You know, you have Joe Rogan there to explain the intricacies. So yeah, I mean, you just take it as it comes, right? I mean, I think for value on investment, Stephen A. is one of the better guys you can get.
Yeah, for sure, 100%.
Do you have a favourite Stephen A. interview? Because I know mine's do you know the one with LaVar Ball? Like that interview was amazing. I just can't stop laughing.
The one with LaVar?
LaVar Ball, yeah.
Yeah, that was funny. Again, no, I just try and learn. Like, I try and learn off these things. So I'll look at it and look at like, if he asked a question and it got shut down, how did he push? How did he get the answer he wanted? How did he respond when somebody pushed back on him? Like, to me, it's like if you're the top, if he's the top of his game for a reason. So when I'm watching it, I'm paying more attention to his body language and how he's kind of putting guys on the back foot with asking questions without being a dick. And then he adds that entertainment value and then charisma when you're on the camera and when you're on the mic. That's one of the hardest things to master. Because I don't know if you've noticed this, but when you're talking through a microphone, emotion is really hard to transmit through a microphone. Everything just sounds monotone, and figuring out how to do that. I'm usually recording at nighttime, so I'll try a bit more and I'll be like, hey, welcome everybody, blah, blah, blah. And I'm more energetic. Today, at this point in time, I'm just like, yeah, I'm just talking. But putting that personality through a mic, he's a master of that stuff. And that's really hard to learn. That's years and years and years of just repeatedly doing that shit.
100%. Finally, you're obviously a CelticsBlog fan. I don't know if you've seen Nate Robinson recently. Jay Paul. What were your thoughts on that?
Is that why boxing's at these days? Like, just having YouTubers scrap it out and an ex-NBA player that's probably half the size of him. Like, again, it's entertainment. I'd much rather see two heavyweights or two middleweights who actually know how to fight having it out and actually seeing guys actually whack each other up for a good reason. The knockout was funny. The memes we got were funny. I wouldn't have paid money to watch it, and I won't pay money to watch any Jake Paul fight, even if he fights. He's fighting Mayweather next, right?
That's his brother Logan.
Logan. Crazy. Yeah, I just that doesn't make sense to me. Like, you're fighting one of the greatest boxers of all time, and you've never earned the right. Really, you're just a YouTube star. It's a novelty. Why has novelty found its way into combat sports? It's like the worst place to put a novelty. What we're going to get next, Jake Paul versus Khabib. Khabib in the cage.
Yeah, he's like, what's Conor McGregor in that? It's like ridiculous.
It just makes no sense to me. I just don't understand the narrative. But again, if it makes money, especially during this time where no one's got any money, then you understand why it's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I get the sort of celebrity matchups, like when the YouTubers and go at the YouTubers themselves, but I don't like it when the YouTubers start saying like, "Oh, I'm going to try and fight professional boxers. I can beat so and so." Conor McGregor calling out all these fighters, actual fighters. If you're going to do it, I feel like it's like sort of a stay in your lane sort of situation, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's like me calling out LeBron James for a one-on-one because I beat some kid down the local park. Yeah, I will beat this random dude on the street in the park the other day, so I'm good enough to play LeBron. What are you on about? It makes no sense to me. I just don't get it. Like when Conor McGregor had that beef with Mark Goddard, do you remember that?
Yeah. When he pushed him in the cage.
Yeah, why are you picking on a referee? Like Mark, and I know this for a fact. Mark Goddard can wrestle, dude. Like Conor McGregor's wrestling isn't good. So why are you picking on a ref for one? Stay in your lane, go and pick on real fighters. And two, you're picking on a guy that once he gets you to the ground, he's going to put you to sleep.
Yeah, it's like second-degree black belt or something, isn't it? Something like that.
Under Braulio Estima. So if you know who Braulio Estima is.
Not sure myself, no, but I've seen him.
So he's like one of the top, I think he's like been top 10 worldwide for like 15 years. He's one of the better Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighters out there, Braulio. So when you've got a second-degree black belt underneath him, and then you've got Conor McGregor that at the time was a blue belt, picking on, it just makes no sense. Stay in your lane, go and fight other UFC fight. Why are you picking on the referee? So why are we getting two YouTubers thinking they can fight Conor McGregor and fucking Floyd Mayweather? It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, it's crazy. You mentioned just fine. I would like to jump in on this actually. You mentioned about your BJJ. How long have you done that, by the way?
Fucking hell. I took about 2 years off. Overall, about 6 years.
Wow.
But like, I had a bit of time off. I damaged my spine doing it. And then I was doing Muay Thai for about 10 years before that. So like, a while, and I've got to train some cool guys. But yeah, I mean, it's just for fitness. It's not. I don't do it to compete. I just do it to not be fat.
It's great for your confidence as well, isn't it? I mean, like
Yeah, I mean, look, man,
any trouble, you can use that.
You can't go and play basketball on a street in England. It just don't happen. Like not at my age where it's dark and it's wet and your knees start to hurt because of the damp. Like so I can't do that to stay fit anymore. So I just go and get beat up for a few hours a day.
Yeah, it's pretty fun, isn't it? Finally, is there anything else you'd like to add, Adam?
Nah. Thank you for having me. If anyone's listening, if you want to follow me, you can follow me at Adam Taylor NBA on Twitter and Instagram. Find my work on CelticsBlog.com, CelticsBlog on Apple, TalkBasket.net. Once a week, I do a podcast there. We usually get some ex-NBA guys on there who are playing in Europe. And then if you want to make some money, don't read what I put on Unibet because you'll probably lose money. But if you do want to have a look at that stuff, then check out Unibet once a week where I drop my hot picks for the upcoming NBA week.
I'll put all them links in the description for you, Adam. Adam, it's been a pleasure to have you. Really appreciate your time. It's been great to know your story. Brilliant.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, man. You guys have a good one.
You too. Thank you.